All right, I'm live. And I see we had a couple people waiting to join in. I'm going to take a moment just to introduce myself while we wait for some people to join us. So I hope you're all having a wonderful Saturday morning. My name is Krista Dennett. I'm a pelvic floor exercise specialist. Now, I'm also a mom of 3 and I've had my own share of issues related to pelvic floor dysfunction. My children are now older. They're 16, 14, and 11. And it was my journey that led me into getting into pelvic floor exercise rehab, essentially. So what I wanted to clarify before we get started on the information and the questions that I'm going to be answering for you is that I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm a fitness professional, and I've been working in the fitness industry for well over 10 years, but I specialized about 7 years ago in pelvic floor related exercises and rehabilitation. So I've been doing this for 7 years. So I've gotten to see countless women over the years and have seen the benefits of exercise rehab in helping women eliminate symptoms. So there's a difference between eliminating symptoms and eliminating the cause. And exercise rehab, in my opinion, what I've seen over the years, has helped eliminate the symptoms. So for example, if you have incontinence, it stops the leaking. If you have a prolapse, it stops the feeling of that pressure on the pelvic floor. If you have weak abdominals, it works on eliminating that weakness. If you have a hypertonic pelvic floor, that's a big topic right now for myself and with a lot of people, then it helps reduce the tension in those muscles. As far as the underlying symptoms, incontinence, prolapse, diastasis, hypertonicity, sometimes, for example, let's take prolapse, there will always be a level of a bladder prolapse, but it's how we're managing it. And that's where exercise rehab is so important. And that's why I've been very passionate about it over the last 7 years. And I've been very fortunate since May 2019 to work in a pelvic floor physical therapist clinic as we call it the physical therapist support worker. So I help implement an exercise program, an exercise rehab program to help women, again, eliminate those symptoms under the guidance of the pelvic floor physical therapist. So I've seen a lot of things that have been successful over the years, and I want to get this information out to as many women as possible. So many of you have probably signed up for my little mini lesson on your pelvic floor ABCs. I'm going to put the link in to that course in the comments of this video so you can have a look there. And also there'll be some resources that I talk about in this video because I have some of your questions already and I'm going to be answering them and apply those resources into the comments as well. Okay, let's get started. We have some people watching today. Thank you so much for joining me on my very first live YouTube. Well, not live, a little nervous going live, but that's okay. Right, here we are. Let's get off talking about just an understanding. So if anybody's watching and have not heard me speak before, have not watched any of my videos, what I'm referring to training is essentially, I would say, invisible or muscles that you don't see or in many cases don't feel. So we're talking about the inner core when I'm answering your questions here. The inner core of muscles essentially is your diaphragm at the top, your pelvic floor at the bottom, these transverse abdominals that wrap around you like a corset. They're deep internal muscles that hold everything in. And then we have these muscles up our spine known as the multifidus. So this forms an inner canister and they work as a team in coordination of breath. So when you inhale, the other 3 muscles are relaxing and lengthening. And as you exhale, they're co-contracting. They're responsible for anticipating our movement. They're responsible for keeping us stable, so making sure we don't fall over, holding in our pelvic organs, maintaining continence, and also for our sexual health and function. Over the years, I've seen in even my journey through dealing with symptoms of dysfunction that we were just originally told to do our Kegels, like 30 Kegels a day. That can help for some, but it wasn't helping for many. And the reason is because those muscles are not muscles just sit there and contract when you're not doing anything. They are responsible for movement of the body. So we need to train them in movement. We need to teach them how to work again. So what stops them from working? Well, many of you probably had issues arise after you had a baby. That's because our body starts to grow, our stomach starts to grow, and we get locked out into different positions, and that turns off the natural ability for that inner core to function. So that's why in postpartum especially, or even through pregnancy, if we're managing it through pregnancy, maintaining the ability to get our ribs moving with our breath, working on maintaining our alignment so that the inner core can flow nicely, keeping in tune with our pelvic floor, whether it's tight or it's weak. We want to make sure we're aware of what's going on so we can help ourselves through pregnancy, and then we work on it in postpartum in the same way. But a lot of times for women, things don't happen until later on. So I've seen actually earlier on, and even included for myself, most of the symptoms happen maybe 2 or 3 or 4+ years beyond having a baby. I've worked with women in their 50s and beyond who've never had children and end up with issues like incontinence or pain. So there's a lot of underlying reasons for that, and I'm going to get into your questions to answer those as well. All right, well, thank you again here. I see we've got some followers and as people watching. You feel free to ask a question to me here. I'm going to answer the questions that I was given in advance, and if I see there's any questions here as we go along, I'll address those as well. All right, the first question is, now this is because most of you have watched my videos and lessons on exercise rehab for pelvic floor dysfunction. So how much time each day do I have to spend on doing rehab, and how long is it going to take? Good question. My initial thing is to say, first of all, this is boring movements. If you're used to like getting in the gym and pumping some weights, or even just our lack of patience as human beings, it can be very boring. So initially when I'm working, and especially my self-directed programs, I try to keep it at about 20 minutes a day. And then that does extend depending on what we're working on. But I've worked with women who have said to me, Krista, my life is so crazy. I've got 3 little ones at home. I've only got 5 minutes to care about myself. And that's okay. Like, I'd rather you have learned to take 5 minutes, and I can put something together for 5 minutes. Will that be effective? Yes and no. It will maybe just make the process a little longer. But that's okay, because I've worked with women like that, and guess what? They started to realize the benefits of that self-care time, of that exercise rehab, and then next thing you know, they said, okay, I can do 10 minutes, I can do 15, now I can do 20. So the ideal time would be 20 minutes. That's when I can put the most effective exercise rehab program together for you. That covers my strategy of releasing overworking muscles and then retraining that inner core to function and movement. Now, how long does it take? How long are you going to have to do this exercise rehab? Again, there's no definitive answer to that. It really depends on your level of commitment to self-care, and that's a hard thing for women, and I understand that. But I can tell you that it feels so amazing when you start to feel the changes in your body. So we just have to hold out till we get to that point. The other thing that can take time is dependent on what the symptoms are. So I've talked about hypertonic pelvic floor. That's where the muscles are holding tension, and we need to look at this as a 2-part rehab. We need to release the tension of those muscles and then work on retraining those muscles. So that sometimes can take a little bit longer. Maybe you've had your symptoms for a number of years and you've just been living with it, which many women do. That too can mean it may take a little bit longer for the process to work for you and you start to see a change in eliminating those symptoms. My self-directed programs online are for 8 weeks. That is the initial time it takes for 2 things: mind-body connection. So it can take a week or 2 weeks just to understand breath, coordination with your pelvic floor contraction, and then applying it to simple movement. So it literally is the mind having to talk to that body to get it to function. Sometimes I've had women, though, that has taken longer to get that connection, and some women haven't been able to get that connection at all. So we have to look at different strategies. So I'll get into that in a moment. From there, it takes muscles 6 to 8 weeks roughly to start to see us change in strength and tone. So the initial 8 weeks is to teach you the foundations of exercise rehab, to learn the function of your inner core, to learn how to apply it to movement. After that 8 weeks, it varies from woman to woman. Some want added support and continue on. Others say, that's great, I totally get it now. I know now how to apply this to whatever else I want to do in life, whether it's just functional movement, going for walks, or maybe you have an athletic goal like a half marathon or a CrossFit challenge. So it's a baseline of information and helping you get those muscles working the way we want them to do. The process of exercise rehab is this. That inner core, you probably didn't realize it was working, and it's even working right now. Like I'm standing up because I like standing up, and it's even working right now to hold me from tipping over, right? So the idea is to bring the muscles into our conscious awareness, to teach them, and I'm sorry if my camera's going in and out. One day I'll get a good camera. Yay. So it's to teach the muscles to work as they're meant to work. This is how they're born to work. And it's not just about Kegels and adding it to movement. It's about your breath and alignment. So let me just pause here, and I just want to summarize one quick thing on breath. I do have 3 videos on YouTube you can watch: breath, posture, and pelvic floor contraction. But just take a moment right now and take a few deep breaths and notice, where are you breathing? So if you watch me breathe, you don't see a lot of breathing up and down, right? We want to get the ribs moving. We want to get the diaphragm able to drop down. We want to get the muscles flowing together. So we need to bring that into our awareness, retrain it in movement, and then what happens after that? So that was another question I have is, okay, I've done the exercise rehab. I no longer have my symptoms. So am I having to do this exercise rehab forever? And the answer is no, not to the extreme that we've been working on to eliminate those symptoms. However, our bodies change as we get older. Hormones change the integrity of our muscles, specifically our pelvic floor. So it is a good idea to constantly check in with the function of your pelvic floor, to check in with your posture. I'm noticing right now, if I'm sort of getting a little bit lazy, I'm gripping my glutes to hold me and resting on my hip joints and knee joints. So I just want to check in with my posture. Am I locking out my knees? Am I relaxing my glutes? Am I using my muscles to hold me up and not my joints? Can I go for a run and maybe do a couple Kegels in that run? Oh, yay, good, it works. I don't encourage that you are constantly Kegeling throughout the day, no matter what you're doing. For example, when you're doing a workout, maybe you're just checking in with that pelvic floor in 1 or 2 repetitions of a movement. You're going to warm it up in your warm-up routine, just like you would warm up the rest of your body. But you don't need to obsessively contract that pelvic floor because we don't want it to go towards a hypertonic state. So for me, I mean, it helps that I'm always talking about it, but if I catch myself all of a sudden a little bit of tension is creeping up in my low back, then I check in. Oh, where's my body lying right now? Where do I need it to be to move away from that pain? Is my inner core working? Is my breathing okay? And just check in. So that's the process, and something that you will have the tools to do and know for the rest of your life. Okay? So hopefully that helps answer those 2 questions. I've had some questions about pelvic floor physical therapy. So I work with pelvic floor physical therapists. And the first thing that I want everyone to understand is there's a difference between a regular physical therapist and one who is trained for pelvic floor physical therapy, because they are able to do an internal exam. And that ideally is the best way to determine how your muscles are working, how your pelvis is functioning. So the question was, how does pelvic floor physical therapy work? Well, again, I'm not a pelvic floor physical therapist, but I do work with them, and I've seen a pelvic floor physical therapist myself. What I want you to first of all know is when you go to that pelvic floor physical therapist, don't be afraid of the information that you're learning. So sometimes you might find out you have a bladder prolapse and you had no idea. That's not a death sentence. If anything, you should be grateful that you're now aware, because you will now have, like, videos like my own, information to help you address those symptoms. to alleviate the pressure you might be feeling from that pelvic floor or the pain that might happen during intercourse with hypertonic pelvic floor or a prolapse. So don't be afraid of ask questions. Learn about what's going on with your body. So one of the things that a pelvic floor physical therapist looks for is the function of your pelvic floor muscles. So they look at strength, endurance, agility, and the ability for it to lengthen and relax. Strength is how deep into the layers of your pelvic floor muscles can you contract your pelvic floor. So I'm going to grab my pelvis here for a second. Your pelvis is a bowl shape. This layer you see inside, that is your deep layer of muscle. Then on the exterior side, where we have the rectum and vaginal opening and urethra, this is your superficial layer. So oftentimes women are Kegeling, but they're only connecting with that superficial layer. They're not getting that nice deep contraction. So a pelvic floor physical therapist will look for that with respect to your contraction. And then endurance is how long can you hold that contraction. So they usually only measure it up to, can you hold it for 10 seconds? So where does this apply? Well, for example, you really have to go pee and maybe you have urge incontinence. Well, maybe you're lacking endurance of that pelvic floor, so you can't hold it long enough to get yourself to the washroom. So that is endurance. Agility is how quickly can that muscle turn on and off. And that is relevant for things like jumping, running, quick, fast movements. Can it fire on real quick? What can happen when people try their quick contractions, and they usually measure how many, if you can do about 10 in 10 to 15 seconds. But what could happen is that muscle could not let go. Oh, I see it frozen. Hopefully I'm not still frozen for you guys. So I'll keep talking, and when I unfreeze, we'll see what happens.